So we'll go around the room, we'll say who's here and who we are, and Rob, we will start with you.
Hi, Rob Mezzanotte, Assistant Superintendent.
Andrew Hennius, attorney for the committee.
Erin Earl, School Committee Chair.
Jennifer Lima, School Committee Member.
Laura Bateman, parent of kids at Stony Lane and Fishing Cove.
Abby Ryan, student at NKHS.
James Strong, student at NKSD.
Mia Thompson, art teacher at North Kingston High School.
Jason Diego, parent, Wickford Middle School and North Kingston High School.
Awesome.
Oh, and I'm also a parent, by the way, as well. But I forgot about that. Thank you. Sorry.
Awesome. I want to welcome all the new committee members. We are excited to have you. If you have any questions as we go through things, we're really casual here. It's not like the school committee meetings, which are much more formal. We're super casual here, so don't be afraid to jump in, ask questions, interrupt, or whatever. Ken Duva, the superintendent, is also here. He just stepped out of the room. So the next on the agenda is citizens' comments. I think, did we have somebody? Yes, okay.
Can I just sit here? Is
You
that okay?
absolutely may, yes.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Sandra Mikulski. I teach 7th grade at Davisville Middle School. And our curriculum at the moment is geography with a focus on Asia and Africa. And I'm here to speak and to share my thoughts in person around a policy that is being discussed and proposed here in North Kingstown. And I just want you to know that I'm an individual who has worked hard throughout her career to bring the outside world into my classroom. I don't claim to be the expert, but I've worked very hard to educate myself and to learn more about our world. And with that being said, I have done more than 600 hours in the past 12 years during my summer, participating in summer institutes in other countries. And that includes Korea and Japan and Armenia, over 8 other countries where I've participated in very structured environments, where I'm taught about different cultural issues as well as historical. And I'm concerned with the current policy draft that's in place because even though I've put forth a lot of time and energy, I fear that I would still not be meeting the expectations of this policy. And I've submitted a letter along with Jacqueline Lawler with our concerns, and instead of reiterating all of these concerns, I am going to read my last 3 paragraphs because it kind of sums it up. It'll be documented. Individuals who haven't seen it will at least get kind of an overview.
Sandra, just so you know, I did provide a copy to everyone here.
Okay,
So
thank you.
You're welcome.
At every opportunity, at every turn, teachers should be encouraged to bring the outside world into the classroom in the most authentic way possible, with the understanding that primary sources are ideal, but secondary sources may be the reality if teachers are to provide hands-on, energizing experiences for the students. To prepare our students for the 21st century, North Kingstown School District must foster global competence in the areas of communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. And that comes from the Asia Society. And Vision of a Learner, NKSD, within our students. But we are remiss to think that this will happen through videos and textbooks. Our world is facing more complex and complicated challenges, yet NKSD will clearly be at a deficit unless the worlds of our students expand within the classroom through the exposure to new and different by participating, and I do emphasize participating, in cultures unlike their own. We also know that due to the economic circumstances of some of our students, the exposure to other cultures they receive in school may be the only exposure they get. It is imperative that we take every opportunity to teach without fear of doing it wrong and being punished. Of course, mistakes will be made. What we strive for is a district that will respond to those mistakes, believing that there were good intentions at the onset and that once we know better, we'll do better. The vision of a learner is not to be a spectator of the global community, but a genuinely engaged citizen who is inquisitive and excited to explore the globe. Moving forward, the North Kingstown School District needs to affirm its commitment to celebrate our global community by encouraging their teachers to bring the outside world into their classroom rather than look for ways to discourage our attempts to engage in the world around us by enacting policies that promise punishment and retribution for missteps. The policy should encourage bravery rather than discourage risk-taking. Again, we believe that it is a well-intentioned policy that aims to protect our students. We fear that the interpretation will be not to risk it when designing lessons, events, and initiatives that involve cultures outside of our own. We remain convinced that this would be a great shame. Please consider further revisions and focus less on punishments and more on grace. I believe that our district has a lot to offer. I believe that healthy risks can happen. I believe that participating and engaging is the way to go. And I would want that for my students. I would want that for my own children. And I hope our district will move in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming and sharing your thoughts and for putting them in the letter. I had a chance to read through it. And I hope you'll stay for the discussion. It is first on the agenda, but I'm gonna, because Chaz has been waiting patiently for months to have his policies discussed, and those I think are gonna be a quicker discussion. I'm gonna move those up on the agenda, but I hope you'll stay through those.
Oh, well, thank you.
while
I would love to stay if I'm welcome.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, you're welcome. Okay, so if nobody minds, I'm gonna move the technology ones up because I think those will be a little smoother. Chaz, don't prove me a liar, okay? And we'll go through those. So B, C, D, E, and F are, Chaz, do you wanna come to the table and
Sure,
talk about them?
I'll take that same seat.
I think these are just basically updates, right? You
Correct.
and Rob had put
Yeah.
these forward back, I think in May, it looks like.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, it sounds
Yeah.
About that time. Yeah.
And I did go through and make the changes in the draft that you had emailed me. Do you wanna just go through them in order?
Yeah, I think we just start.
Just before you do that, Chaz,
Yeah.
if you're wanting to follow alone on your own, if you go to that folder that has the policies and then go to policies in progress, you'll find folders that have the different ones, and then there'll be like the most recently updated one is the one that Mr. Mezzanotte is going to put on the screen, and let us know if you need help following along.
So, which is the first one?
Do you want to do
This-
responsible use of technology? That's the first one on the agenda.
Yep, yeah, so, so the responsible use of technology, some of these are just, some cleanup, but this is the overarching policy for, that all student signs is what's in the Aspen workflow. Some clarification up here, seems like it's been added, there's a little bit of terminology cleanup for sure, to be done here, but of this policy in particular, let me just make sure I'm also scrolling through the right one. There's one key particular item, which I believe was down a bit, that I just think thought needed to be added here. And I'll explain a little bit more. I keep going down, sorry. It's like halfway down. Yeah, so this, if we go up a little bit, this just needs to be cut. So I actually, Jules actually helped me find this specifically, so I was trying to find where this -R version of this policy, the regulation for this policy was. Looks like in 2022 it's gone. Hence why I couldn't find it, so
Yes.
that was good. So that was basically, I just think we need to obviously get rid of that word. That wasn't the big key item, but if you just want to point that out, if you scroll down a little bit further, yep, that should be, parents should be added in there, because technically they do. But if we keep going, there's one item down in the guidelines, there's a line that we added that basically it's going to ensure, here we go, sorry. So this one right here, I thought this was important to add. So the way this had been essentially done in years past was, as software and tools would be like, hey, so we're changing a user agreement, as I'm sure you've all seen when like any program says, hey, we've updated our user agreement, we have to agree or else it ceases to get used. Technically, we are agreeing on behalf of everybody. So, and Google and Microsoft now are pushing forward that they want explicit agreements from every single person involved, not we are agreeing on their behalf, unless we explicitly disclose. That is the normal behavior and best practice anyway, but before we just do that, I also thought it important that parents know anything that is being used for curriculum purpose. If we have to agree to a terms of service for whatever reason on behalf of the student, they know that could be the case, that we do have to do that. A big one that's gonna come up is Google. Google changes their user agreements all the time. We technically have all of us in Google, so that I just thought was a really big key item to have for the sake of transparency, that parents know, yes, we do this and we have to do this or else some things cease. The wording, obviously we could clean it, but I wanted to make sure that it's specifically, this is only on behalf of things that are a part of curriculum or part of like a district approved piece of software. We're not gonna do it for anything beyond that. So, not sure if there's any questions on that. That's the key item, at least on this one.
So the only other questions that I had in looking at it was just cleaning up with like the inclusive language, adding guardians where it just says parents. In the first paragraph where we're talking about the technology where it says shall include and then it lists the different kinds, I didn't know if we should add something about like not limited to, just because technology seems to be changing all the time, like that way we're not.
Faster than these policies.
Yes.
I would agree. I would
Okay.
agree. And there's actually some other.
I saw that you did it somewhere else, like, which includes but is not limited to, like, the local network resources.
Yes, so if I missed that, yes, I would agree. Cause,
Okay.
and some others that we're gonna get to as well are similar. A lot of these are, it does change too quickly, and don't want us to be in a position where we can't do the right thing or the best thing because we just forgot to add it and it's too specific.
It's come up. And then the only other thing, and I don't know if it lives here, if it lives somewhere else, is that, like, should we let people know that any communication on district email is subject to APRA?
Yeah, so I actually saw your note on that lesson. I thought, I would, so I'm of two minds. I would agree. I actually think I agree. I'm also of I've always considered that to be evident, but I understand wanting to
I mean, we
put
do
it out
say,
there.
like, in there that, you know,
I don't think that that's evident to most people.
It's not evident to most, a lot of people are
Including
surprised by it.
students.
Well, so hence why I would agree. That's why I'm
Yeah.
saying I'm of two. I clearly am mistaken in that.
and
that
I feel like
assumption.
it's something
What is-
that has come
yeah.
new these days, like,
I can add a sentence to that at the next, or even tonight or tomorrow morning
So
if you
just to
want.
keep the committee
oh yeah.
with us here. So basically all correspondence on NKSD emails are subject to, similar how this meeting is subject to the Open Meetings Act, is subject to what's called an APRA, which is access to public record. And so if a student or a teacher or someone emails someone and then someone APRAs it, there's a process that the public can request things. Anything that has transpired on that email server is open to the public. So I think what Jen's advocating for is adding some language into this policy so that people are aware of that and that it's kind of like, we can say, oh, we told you that that was the
Right.
case. Does that make sense to everyone? Any thoughts on that?
And to be clear, it's not all information. If it's confidential
Yeah.
student information or something like that, it either doesn't get provided or redacted, but they are all subject to at least
A review to
a review
see-
process to see if we have to turn them over or not.
I think
And
I was just gonna say, as a parent, like, having that conversation with my children, like, we're brand new to the district, so having that conversation that what you do on your devices is something that is of public record, I think is important to have, and I don't think, as we were going through the paperwork, I don't think that was abundantly clear.
Yeah.
So when we were reading through, either this one or one of the other ones, that kind of stepped out at me that that's an important thing, and my question was, how is that being communicated at the school level, and then also being a teacher, like, how does like, is that something that's getting pushed to staff members across the board as well? I don't know what the
No,
training
and that
policies
was
are.
more my, like, I don't know, Andrew, like, if a minor's communication would be, I think that might be protected, I'm not sure,
Again,
but-
subject to the process, like Dr. Earl said, but if it's a student record which identifies the student, then it's going to be confidential, whether it's something we end up, redacting out or just not providing. Where this really comes to pass, more recently is staff emails.
Mhm.
And emails with staff member to staff member, if they don't reference,
For staff member
if
to
they-
parents.
yeah, staff member to parent, well, parent depends on how you name them,
Depends,
but
yeah.
I think the important thing is to just realize that it's possible. It's certainly possible that anything in your email, could be subject to an APRA. Almost all student information, student identifiable information is exempted out, and like I said, is redacted, but I think it's important to know, and I think especially for staff,
For
because
staff,
that's
to
the one we
protect
see
the
the most now.
staff, to-
Yeah,
for
if the
them to
staff
know,
emails
yeah.
another staff member and they're not mentioning a student, if the staff emails the superintendent and is not referencing another student, that is absolutely an APRA-able.
So I think what we should do is, because there's a bunch of these, like, figure out which one makes most sense.
Mhm.
Like, it might be this one, but I think there might be another one that it might be,
So there's two
yeah.
that it makes applicable sense to, but I think this one would be your best bet because
Mhm.
specifically, later down in the responsible use of tech, the regulations that were in that separate policy are basically merged into this.
Mhm.
And within there's a form that is basically laid out. That form is the agreement that we put into Aspen that all parents and students basically sign when they.
And this is also
Do the
one of the
technology.
policies that staff has to sign off on.
Exactly, so I think if you have it in that one spot, staff will see it and parents will see it and students will all have been exposed to it.
Yeah. Do we wanna be, and maybe I missed it, but like really clear that this is for both staff and students? Cause some of our
Yeah,
policies just cover students and some of them don't, but this one covers both, correct? So I would recommend maybe being clear about
yeah.
that. Cause then also at the bottom, it says, to the point that Chaz made earlier about, like how North Kingstown might like agree to terms and conditions on behalf of students. I assume we're also agreeing to that on behalf of staff, so we
True.
should add that in also.
True.
Just add to the title at the very end for students and staff, so that we know this is for everybody,
Yeah.
the title of the policy.
Okay,
Also use
'cause I
technology for
didn't know
students
this
and
applied
staff.
to staff, like, it wasn't clear to me, I thought this was just a student facing, like a student related document. My other question was, there's talking about penalties for inappropriate use up to and including expulsion from school, and I didn't think we expelled students anymore.
Expulsion in Rhode Island,
Yeah, we don't.
it's a term of art, but all you can do in Rhode Island is suspend for the balance of a school year. You cannot suspend beyond one school year.
So do we need to change that language?
I think expulsion is a misleading term. I
Okay.
mean, it's still used, but I would prefer a
Okay.
long-term suspension.
I see that here, that's
Number 8,
Yep, number 8, yep, I
under
see that here.
guidelines.
Up to including long-term suspension?
I said, do they have questions?
Please.
Does anybody else have questions?
Yeah.
Or thoughts on
comments?
this one, or things that,
I just wanna make sure that, Jen, did you mention something about that last part having reference to staff as well
it's the
as-
red part that chat on the second to last page where it says NK agrees to software terms on behalf of students to ensure.
On behalf of students and staff, we wanna say.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
Anybody else, questions, comments? Laura?
I have, yes, thank you. I have two unrelated. One is, are there any click-throughs that, that staff and students go through when they access their, like, Chromebooks or whatever that says, I acknowledge blah, 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 blah? Yes,
Not on
that
the-
they hit every time?
Not on the Chromebook, but that would be in Aspen during like, usually at the start of every school year and when they first basically onboard some of the workflows that they go through include this in particular, this policy in particular.
Okay, but there's no click-through that, like, continues? Like a screen that pops up when you first sign on?
Not on the Chromebook, no, not on the Chromebook.
On
This is
staff
just in,
computers?
no, this is just, it would just be, right now it just exists within Aspen.
Okay.
That people, but you agree to it within Aspen. What's the,
Oh, I just, like in some of the places I've worked, where we have a complicated, like, we monitor for this and that, but we still exempt out this and that. We just had, it's a click through that every time we log on to our machine that's issued to us, it reminds us, hey, here's a summary of this is the policy, here's where you can find it, and here's the summary of what it is, and I have to click I agree every single time I log into my machine. I was not suggesting that we do it, I was just asking. I'm so sorry, I have all the
No, it's
questions.
okay, that's okay.
And none of them
Yeah.
mean anything.
No, I just wanted to make sure I was following where you were describing it
Perfect.
correctly, that's all. That makes sense, I
I was
got
just
you.
wondering. And then I have another one, related to the students and staff, adding the and staff to the end of that one sentence. Do we have non-employee staff that access these systems, like contractors and things like that? And does that require adding another word besides staff? Should it just be anybody who accesses?
There is
thing.
nobody, let me make sure I'm correct on this. There is nobody who, if they don't have a user account through us, we can't agree to any terms of service on their behalf regardless. This would only be for people who are accessing those tools through those accounts.
Like where would coaches land in staff land?
Same,
They're-
they would, if they have, they would have accounts.
Are they
that
considered staff when they're
Correct.
coaching?
Correct. We could change the language, I guess maybe from staff and students to like all user
Users
accounts or
of,
all user, yeah. That might get a little too techy, cause that's like not typical terminology, but, yeah.
As long as you think everyone, to Laura's question, like as long as you think everyone that has an NKSD user account falls into one of those two categories, they're either considered staff or they are a student, then I think it's fine.
Yeah, cause there are like incredibly rare exceptions where someone is a staff member, but they don't have an account. But we would not be agreeing to any terms of service on their behalf, so.
So just to be
That's a good
clear,
question.
right, like this policy only applies to people who are logging in outside of the guest Wi-Fi, correct? Right, like,
Yes, because that is treated separately. The
Okay.
log, that's one of the other policies, the log on usage policy.
so that's really what this policy is for people who are like NKSD.net users, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so it's not so much students and staff, it's people who have an actual log on.
Which would include users and staff.
Okay,
Yes, but
yeah. So it wouldn't apply to anybody who's like walking into the gym to watch a game and logs onto the guest network?
no,
Okay,
there is a separate policy for that,
okay,
that is in here, but no, this one does not apply to them.
okay.
Jen, you had mentioned here about additional context or something in the, one of your comments?
It was on page 2.
Yeah.
And it seems like it was pointing to if appropriate content is alerted
Oh,
and does not
this-
impact.
This was just, like, so I get this, right, like, it's basically saying, we're not monitoring, I think this is saying, we're using a service that monitors students' use of internet while the student is connected to our network but off campus. And we're basically using it for life safety. But that we can monitor it at any time. But if we're getting alerted to inappropriate content, but it doesn't impact the school day, we're not gonna do anything. I just feel like with some privacy concerns, like, can you just kind of, I read that as like, we could find you and what you were doing if we wanted to, but we're not going to unless we have a reason to fear for your safety.
That's, realistically, that's what it is.
Okay,
So, the thing is this is a tough one, because unfortunately, so we've, I use a tool we use pretty regularly, GoGuardian, in the district. Because we give our students, Chromebooks, we have to acknowledge that they may be using this Chromebook that does have some sort of management tool on it outside of the schools. We do have to acknowledge that in some capacity. What is considered inappropriate is depends on the context. So like if you're in a classroom, popping on to play an online game during the class would be considered inappropriate, but if you're at home and you're playing a game, contextually there's no reason to act on that. So that's why that wording is that way. It's a bit of a tough one. I think it's important we acknowledge that those tools are there, and if we need to say a device is lost, we can geolocate some of them. We technically are using a tool outside of our network to access the location of that item. that's why that wording exists like that. So it didn't draft this particular language, but I can see the intention here, which is just outside the school day, unless it's an imminent threat to your safety, and we've been asked from some higher power, it's pretty much not acknowledged. But if there is like a missing person or something.
Okay.
Does that make a little more sense?
It
I know
does.
what I'm saying too might not always specifically align to what intention is, but reading that again, that's exactly what that intention would appear to be.
I'm sorry, me again.
We don't have more for questions, it's literally why you're
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
So this is, I did not allot enough time, I guess, to deconflict these 4 tech policies as to all these areas, but I flagged a lot of them as having overlap, like where they seem to say. And so, and I don't know how much of that is intentional, and I don't mean to hold this thing up, because it's not necessarily a problem. But this was one area that did confuse me, because in the, right now, we're in the responsible use of tech in the CIPA internet use on page, I don't know, it might be page 1, down towards the bottom, statement, except as provided in this policy statement or otherwise provided by law, we will not monitor, control, or restrict computers or information available online, and then it doesn't go into all of those things that you're saying. So I'm wondering, should it be in, is there a reason that the statements are in both? Do they contradict each other? There's a lot I don't know about it.
That's okay, and the one that you're pointing to is actually a bit of an interesting one. So the number 2, the one that relates to SIPA, this one, we're required by federal law to basically have this policy here, and it has to do very specific things, and it also has to have some specific language. Basically, if anybody who gets federal funding for their networking, which we do get assistance, has to have this. There is some redundancy, but
does it contradict the other one?
not to my knowledge.
the
Are
other-
you seeing an example of one? 'Cause not to my knowledge.
Well,
I'm sorry?
yeah, I mean, looking at the SIPA policy, I think what your point is anyway, is it's saying here that we will not monitor, control, or restrict access of any user. And on the policy that we currently have under review, I think it's accurately stating that while we may not, we do have, software applications like GoGuardian that will monitor that.
Does
For
monitor
safety
different
reasons.
than
Oh, I think I
restrict
see.
though?
You see?
I think I see. Oh, yeah. Let me reread this again. I think I see where you're coming from.
To the question, and this is good for everyone in the group to know, our goal, we inherited 90% of these policies as a school committee, and our goal over the past 3 years has been trying to reduce policies in combination, and then also eliminate duplication. So that is a very important thing that we're trying to work on, especially if there's contradicting information. Our goal is to reference the other policy instead of repeating information and things like that. So those are really important things to us, just for context for the whole committee.
That's my love language, I love that.
You're in the right spot. Get excited. Okay, so in the interest of time, Jen, we probably could let the lawyer and Chaz figure that out. Like
Yes.
if there's, and we can move on. You know,
Yeah.
we've noted
Yeah,
it.
that's
We don't
fine.
need to
I know
fix
I
it.
know exactly what the point is.
They can
If-
figure
I
out what
think
they
I
do
see where
there.
I can see that interpretation. Yeah.
Mhm.
I think if you just take from one and put it onto this one, I think.
Yeah, but the question is that language required under SIPA?
If, I'm sure it's required to SIPA, we
Yeah.
can add to it.
So then we can add to it? Okay.
Yep.
Alright, so we'll fix that. Other thoughts, questions from the students about and if you don't have any, it's okay, but this is, you have to follow this as students, right? And so if there's something you don't understand in it, if there's something that you're that doesn't make any sense, or that's not what I experienced, those are really important things for us to know too, because we wanna make them as accurate as possible to what happens on a day-to-day basis. No pressure, but just know your voice in that context is super important.
Something I wanted to actually add on this really quickly that I think maybe Andrew and I can make sure this is kosher as well. I've always found, I say always, but I had found that the SIPA, I know we have it's IJNDB.2 and .2a. The thing that I've always wondered why these were separate, because the SIPA
We're very
require-
excited to combine them if you feel it appropriate.
Well, because the SIPA requirement, the major SIPA requirement is that we create an internet filtering policy.
Yep.
So to have a policy that says, here's our SIPA policy, and then we also have a separate internet filtering policy, seemed a little,
You most certainly could combine them.
yeah, they're both mandated, like we have to do both. So I figured that made,
Unless
The
it
most
says it
sense.
has to be a standalone.
Yeah, we can talk about it.
okay, yeah, that's what I just need to confirm. I would,
Got it.
my thought was thinking we could bring them together, but.
Which two was it, Chaz?
IJNDB.2 and 2A.
Oh, hold on, I asked and was not ready. Go
Oh,
again?
sorry, IJNDB.2 and 2A.
2A, which is not on our agenda tonight, correct? There were no changes put forward for that, so it's not, I mean, it exists, but we're not. we
I
have-
don't recall any proposed changes to 2A,
Yeah, so,
no.
okay.
Another context for the new committee members, we did not come up with these wacky letters. They are deemed by some school board national association, so if you're sitting there being like, why did they name them these wacky things? There's actually this like long list at the National School Board Association that dictates the letter combinations and different things, so that's not our fault, just if you were curious.
Okay.
Alright, so are we done with this one at least for now, or does anybody else have questions, comments, thoughts, clarifications on IJ and
Just-
TB?
Just to bring closure, Jen, are you okay with the language as per
Yeah, I just
our
wanted to
discussion?
like make sure that that was what it meant, and just to like put it out there that that was what it meant. And I mean, hopefully parents understand that that means, and students more understand what it means, that there is.
Mhm.
Something I did notice is that we say NKSD 60 times in this document. I looked it up just to check. That seems like a lot of extra words that we probably don't need, as I think a lot of it's implied. So I wonder if when we're cleaning it up, if we could look for areas where we could delete NKSD and like just in that one paragraph, it's 4 times. But oh wait, more than 4. So maybe Jen, if you
Yeah.
could clean that up.
So,
Do you need a motion for this one, or do we need more work on
I
it?
figured let's go through all 4 and then we can talk about them as a whole, because I forgot that there were actually others that we didn't actually have on the agenda tonight, so maybe we. So as to the number 2, the SIPA one,
Mhm.
we had the part that we just talked about there. And then I think there was the one, his or her instead of a there. I had made a comment about the APRA here too. It's like probably Chaz, like what you said, it could be either or, but maybe in the other one.
If we're, yeah, because I mean, realistically, if you're under the purview of SIPA, you're also under the purview of our responsibility to tech
okay.
policy, yeah.
So probably the other one.
Andrew, have we checked to make sure that this, whoever wrote this is actually, like, did we check what SIPA says and make sure that it matches?
Yeah, I'll double check that, but I
Yeah.
believe this policy came from the trust, if I'm not mistaken, a couple of years ago.
I think you're right.
Can you explain what the trust is to our new friends?
That's our insurance company, so basically their lawyers put this together to ensure that we were in compliance with the law for insurance purposes.
I also didn't know what SIPA stood for, Child Internet Protection Act. Good to know.
I also want to say that we actually had a student who did their senior project, was it last year? It must have been last year, on like internet filtering and our security stuff, which really was a good, had us review a lot of our internet policies as a result of this. Anybody have any questions on this one?
I just had one, Jen, under 1 for philosophy, it said, that it must comply with all applicable federal and state laws governing the use of computers and internet. I didn't know if there were like main ones that we should be referencing, like, or if that's just like an overarching fun umbrella of all possible federal laws, you know, like, or state laws, like, I didn't know.
What do you think, Andrew?
My guess is that's going to be quite broad in scope, so that might be a
Yeah.
good way to describe
wasn't-
it as opposed to trying.
I think I wasn't advocating for the general language to be removed, but if there was 1 or 2
Okay.
that were like the gold standard of internet laws in the state or the federal one, you know, like if there was like a big one other than CIPA that people that were reading this policy should know about, maybe just referencing it with still giving that overarching umbrella of any,
Yep.
was what I was suggesting, just if
And
people were
which-
trying to figure it out.
Where were you seeing that?
I'm
Sorry,
under
again?
philosophy on page.
Are you in
one.
the responsibility to tech
I'm
one
in
or
the
on the SIPA?
SIPA one.
Oh, sorry, I'm looking for one.
No, first page under philosophy on the SIPA, it says this policy of the North Kingston School Department to comply with all applicable federal and state laws. I was just thinking like parentheses, for example, or, like
Yep.
X and Y, like, if, you know, if there were other big ones that common folk would not know.
Yep.
Alright. If there's not, just leave it. It's
I'm
fine.
sure there is for Rhode Island.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Okay, if there's no other questions on that one, we'll move on to 3.
Yeah.
Everybody good on that
Oh,
one?
there's me, sorry. I
It looked like everybody was.
I know, yes.
Log on usage. Is this for everybody, or is this just for the NKSD.net people too?
No, this one is anybody on our network.
Okay.
Yeah, so we need to write something about guests and friends.
Yeah, so, fair, because the top line mentions networks, but that's fair, that's a fair
Yeah,
point.
we wouldn't know that.
So, this is where I'm gonna confess that I check a little box when I log on my guests, but I don't know what I'm checking. Am I checking to agree to this policy? Okay.
Yes.
So I had a little box, I had a question about checkbox when logging in, so I guess we don't need that because it already exists? Yeah, you can see I
So,
paid close
what were we
attention to that.
saying?
Well, honestly, that's what, the reason for the other one is everyone just kind of clicks through and accepts. I thought it was important we tell people we're doing that.
Okay.
Like, that's why, that's exactly the point.
See, Laura, you were ahead of the curve.
So do we wanna clarify in this first purpose statement, something about how this applies to all users of the network, regardless of?
Anyone accessing NKSD network, including guests?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think we should clarify that it is. Cause like, this says that it will be strictly for educational purposes, but guests are not, like, if I'm rolling in for a football game, I'm not necessarily using it for educational purposes when I'm sitting in the stands.
Should we change that to then?
I think so.
yeah.
Or does it not apply, like, do we care, is the intent that it's always, but somebody wrote educational at some point?
Yeah, I'm wondering the intent there, because I would lean more to what you just said, Dr. Earl, about it. You would think someone would have been more vague, like it's all
Great,
users.
we'll make it more vague. Can't hurt, right?
Nope.
I'm just making sure there's not anything that's already covered in the SIPA policy. The thing with the SIPA one is a little bit weird. It's just a little bit, it's on its own because that one we have, like, we're being mandated to have. Wanted to see if it was anything in there as well, but that one's specifically students and staff. Yeah, I
Do
think
we-
we have to. I think we'd have to make something more to acknowledge that there are, you could be a non-staff or student and be, you have to abide by some policies about how
So
how
I'm
you
gonna
behave.
throw something out there, right? Coming to the school and, coming to what, the chorus, and I wanna log on, because I can't get anything. So I log on and I use the guest Wi-Fi.
Mhm.
Click this box. By clicking the box, I'm agreeing to this policy. But I'm also agreeing to all the other tech policies. I have no clue what those tech policies are. And I'm logging on because I wanna go on Instagram while I'm waiting for the course to start. Is that the proper use of the internet that we wanna be allowing for people? When, like, we're trying to write this policy, I'm just going back to what the first line is, where it says strictly for educational purposes. And we do have guest Wi-Fi that we allow, and there are times that we need to allow, for example, a time of specifically the musical, and we're doing ticketing, and we need access because we're doing electronic tickets. Or people might come in for an athletics game and they need to get on the Wi-Fi in order to access the QR code to pay to go into an event. So we're now allowing access for other reasons besides educational purpose, but this policy is also referring to other district policies that we're agreeing to, but we may not know what we are agreeing to. So I'm just wondering if we need to kind of tighten up who we're allowing to use our guest Wi-Fi and what those purposes are for. Or we need to specify in here at times, guest Wi-Fi might be needed for the purpose of accessing school events or, just thinking of what happens in the school that I might have gone to as a parent that
Sure.
is not related to education, but
Are you advocating, Ken, to take the word education out? Or
no, I'm
or are
advocating
you-
for keeping it there, but then also adding more to that, because I think we should specify what that use of that Wi-Fi is for. It's not just to have access to Wi-Fi because you wanna go scroll on your phone while you're there. It's purposely, we're allowing that for a purpose, and I think that purpose should be specified here, because we're also referencing what those other policies are. But as a parent or a visitor coming into the school, I don't have access to all those other policies that I now say I'm signing off on.
Not without internet now.
Well, also, just in general.
Yeah.
Because where am I going, and now I gotta go back and look for all those other policies, right? So what did I just sign off on?
Do we need this one? Can this one roll into the responsible use of tech and have a carve out in that one for guests?
This isn't just about guests though.
Well, that's what I'm saying, like, it's about, you're basically saying when you log on, you agree to all the other things. So can that be rolled up into the other one?
I'm sorry, did you say can or can't?
Can. Can it?
Hey,
Huh?
maybe it can be rolled
I
into
don't
that
know.
one?
Yeah, we'd have to look and see what the crossover is between the two. It seems like, or at least from my reading from this one was more specifically like access rather than like a more broad use, but depending on what is in here, it could,
I would recommend taking a look at it because it's not
Yeah.
that long,
No.
and it seems like a section of a policy versus a policy on its own. So you take out the purpose, you take out the philosophy, you take out all of that. Make sure any of that is incorporated into something else. Like you're talking about 4 paragraphs max.
yeah, you could be right that this could just be
Yeah.
baked
These
in
are
and-
tricky, and I'm pretty good at like following the journey of like policies that reference each other and stuff. And these 4, in addition to some of the other ones, are pretty convoluted. Like to Dr. Duva's point, like I'm like, wait, which one? And now I need to go look at this one, and then there's like in this one it references like 3 different ones, and then so I think part of policy to me is like making it understandable to like the people who are under the policy, and so that's a piece too I think maybe we should look at, because these are very thorough, but like if nobody's reading them or understanding them, then it
I think that
doesn't
makes
matter.
sense, so,
Did you?
sorry.
I was just gonna add, like, when you think of, as you were mentioning before, like, as a parent coming into the school, like, first thing I have to do is log on, and then there's the acceptable use of, like, what's acceptable use. So as I'm hearing this conversation, in my brain, I'm picturing, like, I guess, a pre-part to the responsible use of technology that covers maybe the login piece, and then has your separate, like, stuff, whether you're school employee or student versus a guest, and then the acceptable use. It feels like all that nested under one thing would make it a little bit more easy to digest versus just a login piece versus acceptable use, because to your point, like, there's only so much bandwidth. If people are at a musical performance or at a football game or something else and they're on Instagram, then the people that need to use that Wi-Fi are not gonna be able to have access to it.
I think too we have to acknowledge the fact that, particularly at the high school, like where there are a lot of public events, most don't have cell service, and so it's not just like for recreational use. I need to have something that will make a text come through on my phone for like if my children need me or something, So I think that's part of it too, is that we know that there's a need just for communication in that building.
Yeah, I think the example of getting Wi-Fi access to make sure you can scan a QR code to
Yeah.
take it for the musicals is a good one.
I mean, I'm just thinking like things
Yeah,
I've
it's a
gone to
very-
as a parent
Yeah.
over the past year, that you're, being asked to use your phone to log in, to do something, to get to an event, or to read a brochure, or like those are the purposes that we should be allowing it, or even just to have access, because there's no cell service, but you're logging on so you can
Good
have
text.
communication.
Did you all have questions about this one, the logon usage one?
No.
I was wondering who would like apply under authorized users under your policy.
Yeah, on that first line?
Yeah.
It's a good question.
Because I see under policies, use of the NKSD electronic devices
You know.
and networks
Correct me
is
if I'm-
limited to authorized users only. I was wondering if like this included parents like who need
Mhm.
to access the network.
That's a good question.
Right. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chaz, but am I understanding that to mean like people who have who aren't accessing our network like through secondary means, or not like they're like authorized to log into our network as opposed to accessing it like through a.
It could, yeah, that's definitely an element of it. Authorized is honestly, looking at that again, it's an interesting use of word, because
All you need to do is check the box. It's really just being granted, having followed the steps.
that's how I'm viewing it. Looking at that, authorized is essentially anybody
not
who
like a-
follows the second half of that statement, which is you've agreed to these policies. By agreeing to these usage policies, you are an authorized user.
Yes, we have to say that. I would say that. Right? Because like if I would read that, if like a real rule follower would be like, oh, I'm not an authorized user.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm not sure where the word.
Like I think
I'm not
what
sure
you,
if
how you
authorized is
just
the
said
word.
it makes complete sense to me, right? By agreeing to this, you are now an authorized user. Like the flip of it, but like having it be first, I think is.
I actually just think potentially getting rid of authorized users
Yeah.
from that statement is enough. Only limited to, or users who have agreed to abide by the policies of the district. I don't know, authorized is an interesting word, I'm not sure why that was originally chosen.
But that one's referencing a different. Oh no, is it referencing this policy?
No, it's referencing the first one.
Yeah.
Oh, we can, actually, I have an error there, that's my bad, or I cut out, or the strike through of IJNDBR should also include the admin regulations.
As a strike through?
As a strike through, yeah, that should be removed as well. That's the name of that other policy.
Yeah.
But yes, the IJNDB, I'm gonna do that again, is the responsible use of technology. That should probably actually be called out instead of just the policy code.
I'm team combine these.
I kind of.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
think,
feel like
I think
this
in
is-
general, I
Okay.
agree, actually.
So
I
we
think
can not worry about that because it'll be, but that's a really
You can
good
look at
point.
that.
Good catch.
Yeah, I think we might wanna leave the SIPA one out. The more I'm thinking
Yeah,
about
that
that,
one's
because
fine.
that came as a standalone from the interlocal trust, so maybe we
No, I'm
combine
fine with
these two.
SIPA alone,
and
but
then,
the
yeah,
other two,
yeah.
I think we could.
Combine logon use and responsible
Do you
use of
think
technology.
SIPA though, in the internet filtering one, because
Just because the trust gave us that SIPA filter, that SIPA policy as a standalone, I think it's probably best to keep it as that. But then with the filtering and then the logon, we can combine those.
fair enough.
Did you have something too?
I was gonna say, in terms of educational purposes, you could say school-related activities or something along those lines, so that it references the school. It could be a musical, it could be an extracurricular, it could be communicating with the kid you're picking up, so it's, I don't know if it's vague enough, but so that somebody who's using it not for a school-related activity is then maybe in violation, and that might give us leeway if we needed to, there was an incident or something
And sorry, what was your name?
like that. I'm Katie.
Katie,
Katie's
hi.
here.
Oh, that's
Welcome.
right, Katie, I'm sorry, you
Oh,
came in
that's okay,
after
sorry,
and
I
I
was
didn't
late.
have you introduce
No, no,
yourself.
no.
Okay, this is Katie.
Miss Kitty Parent.
Katie.
Fair.
Yes.
Okay, so which one else, where are we in the tech
So
policy
the
world?
next one is, last one is, for, the WISP one, Written Information Security Program.
Yeah, this one is mostly just some changes because the chief operating officer position isn't filled. There's just a lot of cleanup that needs to be done to change that.
Title-wise.
And I just think it makes the most sense that if,
Do the
however,
assistant
if the assistant superintendent's the one who oversees the IT department, that they would be basically the new designee.
I like that you wrote it right off of you, Chaz. You were like, "Nope, right out, right up the chain."
And then there's some other things, like I think we renamed, or I'm not sure if it's a rename, but I think it's actually the facilities department, if it's not plants and
Yeah,
grounds.
change it from plants and grounds.
Yeah,
to
just
facilities, yeah.
some small things there. However, the kind of more like actual changes is specifically around, it is on here, let me make sure I get the sections right. Section 4 safeguards, under D, the electronic file safeguards. This is where down a little bit further there.
On page bottom of 4.
Yep, just past this section, or in this bottom of the section here. So a couple things, semantics, but could be really important. Changing two-factor authentication to multi-factor authentication. Two-factor, the reason for this is just two-factor is not really what it is anymore. multi-factor is what it is, and I don't want us to ever get stuck in a point where we can't enact or institute multi-factor authentication, because we're saying we're not, or we never say we are, I should say. And then this bottom one, specifically, the implement additional security measures. This gives us some ability to be flexible with best practices, because one of the hard things that we had, and I helped with this one a bit as well. This one came with some ideas, but this WISP policy in particular is really tough because it's requiring us to enable cybersecurity best practices and security best practices, both cyber and physical. But my worry with a bullet point, and some of this is, some of these items are required from the trust, some of them were up to us. My worry with just having the bullet points of we are going to follow these things is that means we're bound by those things. So the reason I chose this bottom to implement additional security measures as recommended by the National Institute of Standards and Technology or other nationally recognized cybersecurity framework, I chose the NIST organization because they're the ones that are run by, or supported by the federal government. I figure if we're gonna abide by one, that one's probably the safest that's going to not just, go away or anything.
Mm-hmm.
But they do provide a flexible, ever-changing best practice, so we can use that to reference. That's all. And I just didn't want us to ever be held to, we can't do something to protect data privacy because we didn't include it on our bullet point. I think this gives us a parameter where it keeps us in check. We can't just implement anything, but we can abide by best practice, if that makes a little more sense.
It does. Jen, on this one, something I noticed, because this one came through, I think, 2025, like since I was on the school, 2025. It doesn't follow the same format as our other policies as far as like how we say purpose and philosophy. So I would just recommend that we make that consistent. A person could put together objective equals X, but I think having that consistency for people helps.
Question I had, Chaz, was it talks about each employee will participate in employee training about the program, get certified, blah, blah, blah. I guess my question is how/when is this happening and where is that verification of the training being kept?
Yeah, so this was part of our security awareness training, so we actually do this. It's a little, it has been, what's what I'm looking for here. We're still developing the actual full rollout.
Okay.
This has been one that we've been enacting with staff as events come up. We send things out to staff pretty regularly about keeping up to date on events. But this does need to be a more formal training that we send out at the beginning of every year, which is what this is saying. That does need to go finish rolling out.
Did that answer your question, Jen?
Pretty much, yes.
Because the way I get it, and maybe it's just me, I don't always love the certificate part. I'm not sure what the certificate, but that was one of those bullet points that was required, or that was put in from the trust that we had to keep. So I kept it, but the way, again, I don't know, you have it up here, perfect. When we're doing like a wide training, some sort of acknowledgement, like I think if we were saying, how like, thinking like bloodborne pathogens or something, where you acknowledge, I've done this training, constitutes of that? Or that would be
Yeah,
the same,
so
if that
are
makes
we
sense?
keeping record of the fact that we have conducted the training and who has taken it?
Not fully yet, no, that's part of this so when this was put into place, this was to prompt us to create that.
Technically, this was approved in April, so annually has not happened yet.
Yeah, so this was part of
He's got time.
we did this in order to get, we were tasked by the trust to get this tool, we had to get approved.
I think to Jen's point though, let's say you all decide like we're gonna always do this in the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
Like, is it something that if an employee gets onboarded in October, like they should be receiving it upon hiring? Like, I think that's where I always worry about things that happen annually. Like, if you start the day after that, then you don't get this information, and does that matter? So, like, is the baseline upon hiring or at, like, convocation or whatever?
I would say,
Yeah.
honestly, it's whichever.
Comes first.
Yes.
Yeah.
Really,
So I would
so
maybe-
much time on that convocation day because it's only a few hours in the morning and we're already packed with the trainings
Yeah.
that we do,
So this isn't a training, this is just a sign off, so it doesn't have to happen
Right, but I'm
physically
also
at
saying,
that.
but also I'm
Yeah.
talking about the training piece in here too, so we gotta like, think about like, and some of that training might be the know before you,
Mhm.
what's it called?
Knew before you.
Yes,
Yep.
with little videos that go out that you then have to like
Yeah,
watch
what,
and answer questions to.
what the intention here, I know from attending the meetings with the trust as well, is it doesn't actually it's not necessarily the way, what they're expecting and what this is ensuring isn't simply like a one time a year we all meet, we all do our thing. This can be an ever, and something that would happen ideally, like my ultimate goal would be this would be something that's continual throughout the year, whether it's quarterly or something that maybe is smaller in scale, because again, information around this can change so dramatically, and I can tell you, so one of the things that we put together last year, honestly, it got withheld a little bit when we were developing it because there was some really big studies that had come out that showed that that method was truly ineffective. So that's pivoted. Obviously, you have to do something, but that's why we actually structured, because we didn't want to roll this out for the first time to people and then pivot it immediately after doing it. So, but ultimately, the goal wouldn't be to even just have it be a one time a year. It would be little things here and there, and then you do acknowledge when you get those little videos, I've done it, and we can get a report on just yay, someone's done it, or nay, someone hasn't.
Thoughts or questions from our?
Anybody have any questions on this one? Concerns, comments?
The way that we do it at my work, Chaz, is we have like we use Brightspace, so like a Brightspace thing, and all my Brightspace stuff goes in to that module. So like, I can see all the things that I've completed, but also I imagine someone could run a query of all the things I've completed too. I know that it's complicated, but that's how we make sure, that's how we do it for the bazillion employees that we have.
No, that's good to know.
That's how we do it too.
Yeah. And then I get emails, like, I'm sure they're auto emails that are like, you have not done this. And I'm like, I know I haven't, I will do it.
So how do we want to approach these four and any other ones that we can't talk about this in on the agenda, but may not have been, there's only one other one.
Just to clarify for our new committee members, if something's not in the agenda because of that open meeting act and we want to be transparent about what we're talking about, we don't talk about policies that are on the agenda, and sometimes it's annoying because we want to talk about it and we can't. So that's why we can't talk about it, just because we want to be transparent, because if people wanted to come and talk about it or something, they wouldn't have the opportunity to do so.
It's kind of like Fight Club.
It's definitely not like Fight Club.
So I feel like there's like too much modification to be done to move anything forward. Would you agree?
I would think now, especially, yeah. I think the idea of consolidation ultimately makes sense.
So we can see it at our next
You and I can
policy.
meet
Yeah.
to cover up, to kind of cover up some of these
Okay,
things and come
then
back
bring
with
it
it.
back at
Yeah.
our next, at
Yeah,
our.
Yeah.
because my original intention was to just make some of these more pointed changes, however, I agree with.
It's my fault, I
some-
jinxed it, I was like, Chaz will be quick and.
No.
First.
So-
I think it's
I agree,
important.
though,
We want to make
You're
it
right.
Yeah.
user
So,
friendly.
so we're looking to combine logon use with responsible tech, merge them, if you will. Yes?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Okay. And then and then everything else, Chaz, we can look at as far as like the feedback we're getting?
Yeah, the wording, the structure, especially for the list, we can change structure.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, defining authorized users, if we're referencing that, and then,
And I'll like policy and philosophize the WISP
SIPA,
one.
too.
I think we have to clarify who that one's for too.
Yeah, add language to
Do
SIPA,
what?
yeah.
Who that one is for,
The WISP?
yeah. It's just employees,
It's
right?
just employees.
But that's not super duper clear,
Okay.
to me at least.
Oh, isn't it? All right. Oh, we could take a look at that one, because it's, yeah, because realistically, it's not just employees, it would be all staff and students.
Oh, students also?
It would include the
Okay.
students, yeah.
Okay.
Because some of this, so we're not in a position, but like, I'll use multi-factor authentication as an example. We're not here yet, and I don't see this actually being the case. But if it becomes if the trust basically comes to us and says, hey, in order to keep your cybersecurity coverage, you need to implement multi-factor authentication to the student accounts. We're pretty compelled to do that, yeah. And I wouldn't want the fact that we didn't include that or acknowledge that to be a hindrance to
Okay.
that. But yeah, the
So we
point
should
of the
put-
WISP is also is specifically to cover all data. And
Okay.
it's not just adults, it's students in particular. This is a type of thing too, just for context, when we go out and go to vendors and buy, material, student data privacy agreements are like top thing we check for. And one of the things that we ask as well now is either some sort of SOC 2, compliance to make sure that the security is correct, or a WISP policy to make sure that they're abiding by best practice, because if they're not, I don't want them handling student data, quite honestly.
Right.
So that is awesome that you do that. Is it something that if you weren't in that position, that we should put something like that in a policy saying that we?
That's the point of this, actually.
Okay.
There's language in here to
Alright.
instill, enact that
Perfect.
behavior. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, I try not to build things around me or
No,
like a
yeah,
person.
just like
It should be
sometimes
that
like I think,
position.
yeah,
Policy.
it's making sure that it's policy, that, to make sure that we're protecting students.
Mhm.
Awesome, thank you, Chad, I appreciate
Of
it.
course.
Everybody else good? Did you get through your questions, Eunice?
Okay, awesome, thanks, Chaz.
Thank you.
Okay, now we will go back on the agenda to,
Also, we don't often break, but if you need a break, you can always just stand up and walk out of the room, and the restroom is down on the left. Like, you go out and it's on the left, so if anyone needs to.
so now we will go back on the agenda to the cultural respect and inclusive engagement policy. So just to give a little background and context on this, we had actually had a draft of this policy like a year ago, maybe?
Before.
Longer
I
than-
couldn't even, time is weird.
Yeah, at least a year ago. We had passed it out of the policy advisory committee, we brought it to the school committee, and we had gotten some feedback from a school committee member, and some teachers that had raised some concerns with the way it was drafted, that it was gonna limit, what could be taught, and that it would actually have the opposite effect of what the policy was intended for. And we heard that, we tabled it, we pulled it back, and we decided that we were going to regroup. The hope was that there would be some discussions and some PD around culturally responsive teaching, and specifically around cultural appropriation, because there have been instances within the district where we have had some cultural appropriation. And that's what led to the creation of this policy. Those PDs and those conversations didn't happen, so we brought forth another draft of the policy that we had tried to have more of a positive, less, a more positive, inclusive tone, and that was the draft that we were at. Now we asked Dr. Duba to get some feedback from the administration and the teachers. There's still some concern around limiting what would be able to be taught. He got some feedback from the teaching staff at the high school and at the middle school. I read through all.
Elementary.
Oh, elementary too.
District-wide. Yep,
Okay,
I met
district-wide,
with
okay.
elementary teachers.
I apologize,
so-
I read
I didn't get
through
to,
it
just to clarify, I did not get to read it because it came in late last night, right?
late last night.
It came in
6 o'clock.
6
last night.
o'clock last
Yeah,
night.
so full transparency, I will keep up, but
Yeah,
I did
no,
not
no,
get
no,
to
I
read
know, yeah.
everything that came through
And
yesterday.
I wanna say that I greatly appreciate the feedback, I hear it, I see it, and the last thing I wanna do is limit what gets taught. Like, I 100%, and I said this when I pulled the policy back the last time, there was a teacher who said that we should be teaching with more freedom, not less. I 100% believe that, and, I believe that teachers in this district are operating with the best of intentions, but we have had some instances that have caused harm to our students, and I don't know how to reconcile the two.
I don't like when you say that.
I know you don't,
Because
but
there's no data behind the harm.
I
think in
understand
some of
that.
it has also been assumptions that have been made by pictures we've seen on Facebook or things that I've had. We had
I
a
have
whole
had
discussion.
parent complaints,
I
Ken,
know.
and they were
Can I-
before you
can I-
in the
can I-
district,
I would
but-
like to finish, please.
Okay.
Thank you. We had a very long discussion regarding the teaching of the Day of the Dead at Whitford
Yeah.
Middle School. Some of it based on pictures that Whitford Middle School administration shared to show what teachers were doing.
Mhm.
When we looked into it, I disagree that it was cultural appropriation because the teachers who did it then showed all the lessons they used. And when you're providing education on a culture, and then you're going through and you're teaching about it, and they're making art out of it, that's not cultural appropriation. That's cultural appreciation through culturally responsive teaching. When someone then wears a costume from someone's culture, yes, that we might be
That's what I'm
appropriating
referring to.
without proper education.
That's what I'm referring
Because
to.
also too, when you go and you research about this, and there's a lot that I don't wanna put Sandra on the spot,
Go ahead.
but my
I'm
children
here.
have had her as a teacher, and she's an amazing teacher, and everything she does with the Silk Road, we wanna see continuing. And they're making some stuff, learning from the culture, and there's months of teaching that's happening to educate them on that culture. That's very important that we do. That is not cultural appropriation. She's teaching them about that
She's a
culture.
wonderful model for.
And I'm just using because she's here. I know she spoke about it earlier. I think we got to be careful of what some of our educators are doing and teaching and bringing culture into place. And I just want to be careful of the statements that we make about harm when we don't have a lot of data behind it.
I want to clarify
That's
that
all.
I'm not referring to the Day of the Dead at the Wickford Middle School, and I'm trying really hard not to call people out
Mhm.
publicly. But I'm not referring to that. I'm 100% referring to costumes
Mhm.
and things like that. And I'm happy to have the conversation with you again offline of the things that have happened.
Yeah,
because
I know
I
we've
do
talked,
not-
we've talked about, and I
do
think
not
it's
wanna
okay to
put
bring
those
the
people
peer
on
about.
blast.
No, I'd
Totally
like
hear
to
you,
finish
Dr. Berg.
about-
You can finish, but.
We've had staff members
Yeah.
that had sombreros, and you pointed that out, they wore that. There was Hawaiian themes, which I think we can go back and forth and discuss if that's cultural appropriation or not, when a middle school has a theme and it's a Hawaiian theme to have a fun event for kids, and they have Hawaiian decorations in there, if that really is appropriation. I think we need to focus on the teaching and the education of this and the appropriateness. And I spent a lot of time this weekend, once I received the feedback from everyone, to really look at this policy, to keep this policy going for the committee, and to make sure that we put it in a positive tone, a teachable tone, with guidelines that people can teach and still have the ability to teach within other cultures, because we have that within world language, we have it within history, we have it within literature, we have it within our curriculums that we have, curriculums that have been put together and developed by curriculum companies that we've then adopted as a school department, as a school committee to put in place. And also, we need to make sure that we can teach regarding that culture about the artifacts that come with it. Should we then be having some of the cultural customs be worn and in a way be disrespectful? No. But I wanna make sure too that if this policy is gonna go through, we're not putting something in place that teachers are fearful of, that they cannot then question everything that they do and they teach. And I just want us to be careful with that. I know you feel very strongly about this, and I want to respect that, but I also want to make sure we're putting something in place that we can actually.
I want
implement.
all those things to continue to happen in the classrooms. I don't want individuals to stand outside of a school wearing a poncho, a sombrero, and a mustache. I think that's pretty simple, and there's a huge gap between the two.
And I agree with you.
Yeah, okay.
So-
That I don't
Perfect.
disagree
Then
with.
let's
I
find
just
where
want to
we
make sure
agree.
that we can.
So as you can tell, committee, there's a lot of feelings about this policy, but I do think, like, from my perspective, like kind of seeing some of the different information, like, I think the goal is, without a doubt, not to hinder the educational teaching that's
100%.
happening in the classroom. So
Yeah.
what I think the committee should do is look at this policy and look for areas that it might be misconstrued or might be blatant that's saying that, like that would lead teachers to believe that they cannot do the wonderful work.
That
I
they've
remember
been
when the
doing.
students
Yep.
came in and they did those amazing Egypt projects they brought in for the school committee.
Yep.
I don't believe that the intent of this policy is to limit amazing things like that. I think it's more of when there is no educational connection or when it's outside of the curriculum, things like that. I think that's the goal. And so I think it's, for me, it's figuring out a policy that will achieve that, but also like not cross into that educational freedom space that we want to make sure our teachers have. So like figuring out how to make this sound correct so that people understand what cultural respect is, what they understand that there's what an inclusive environment is connected to this stuff, and then are able to understand that and follow the policy in that way without the fear of
Mhm.
being making sure that it's still being taught in the way that we want it taught in North Kingstown, if that makes sense. But, so what I think the committee needs to do is, and, you know, I think we got some feedback from the teachers, so we can go through that, is try to find spaces where we need to adjust language in this to make sure that what we're trying to do and what maybe is being interpreted can get cleaned up. That's my opinion on the approach. Here, can you get to hand?
Hi. I spent a lot of time with the original draft of this when it was sent out to us a couple weeks ago. And I have to say, I did review this last night when it came out. I was actually very excited to see it come through because I was curious to know whether or not we would be discussing this today. My initial reaction was all of that discussed. When I first read it, my first reaction was, oh my God, what did we do? And I found some of the commentary very limiting to what, I'm the kind of art teacher that believes that African American art history needs more than a month. You know what I mean? I definitely teach lots of social justice practices within my classroom because, again, I'm a fine arts teacher. And I was very concerned, my initial reaction, the reaction of my colleagues was extremely concerned that, and what you both said, it was a little bit almost like whitewashing the curriculum because now teachers would be so concerned about what they had to teach that they wouldn't even bother doing it. Specifically bringing in, and I'm sure this is just somebody who read it, not somebody who built the policy around it, but specifically pieces of the policy, the original policy that said you had to have professionals in the field come and help team teach these particular practices. I love bringing people into my classroom. I don't always have time to do that. And sometimes it's a very spontaneous lesson that requires some deep educational practices. And I didn't want to have to restrict myself because I could not get my hands on or even afford a professional in the field to come into the classroom. I did read this edited policy last night. I want to point out, first of all, as a teacher at the high school, that I really liked the twist where I feel like this is a lot more positive. I feel like this is a little bit more, the verbiage cited in here was a little bit more encouraging to do the right thing as opposed to do not do this. It was definitely more of a, with respect to the teacher's practice, like engage in it but think about doing it this way kind of education around it. So I really respected that. I also thought that, and some of it was still a little bit like, you know, I don't know the level of acting out that teachers are doing with regard to somebody else's culture. I'm just not sure of that because I've never seen it done. I'm not questioning whether or not it was done. I've never seen it, so I wonder if some of that verbiage is entirely necessary or we need to have a policy in place that in case it does happen again in the manner that was deemed very disrespectful, you know, at least that we can say to an upset parent, no, look, this does not go against our policy, you know, will be dealt with as such. So I wasn't sure of that kind of thing, but I do recognize the more of the positive editing in this, and I think the staff that I work with would appreciate this version much better than the previous version.
Can I just ask a question? So
Yeah.
I apologize for my ignorance, brand new here, but I've been an educator for the past 13 years. I guess my question is in terms of curriculum development, because I did notice in the policy, and I think it's on the second page, that the review and accountability is done by the building principals. So when teachers are coming up with these ideas for different events or different educational experiences, how much role does the principal have in that piece? Or like I feel like, I guess where my concern is, in reading through the comments, that if you make everything black and white and very specific, then it really makes it difficult to express and do certain things in the classroom. But then if you make it too general, then there's the possibility that there could be issues that it sounds like have been in the past, but I feel like that principal piece, the building principal piece, is kind of the go-between that balances everything out. I just don't know, like, if I was a teacher in the school and I wanted to do something, like, does that have to be cleared with the principal? Is there a curriculum coordinator that certain events have to get approved by beforehand? Because it feels like that's kind of the backstop of where this is versus being so prescriptive that this is good, this is not good, this is good, this is not good, and then it limits what teachers can do. I mean, the principals know the students, they know the community, and then also gives a place where the principal could provide that bigger picture of, well, this is where it fits into the curriculum versus the teacher having to explain that. Then it's more school-wide and more inclusive versus, well, this one teacher is doing this. So I guess that's my question is, how does that work in terms of curriculum development? Like, where's the role of the principal or curriculum developer in the process, and could that be the place that there's more focus on versus saying, don't do this?
Could I just comment on that really quick? Because I took that more as for larger events. So in my brain, I'm thinking like PTO events or school-wide events, but please correct me if I'm wrong. I do, however, agree with you in that I would change building principals to school administration in lieu of that, because I don't necessarily go to my principal. I will go to the head of curriculum at the high school. That's the person I would go to. So I just feel like it's just a quick little verbiage change, I think, across the board. Like, there are different administrators fulfill different roles. It's not always the building principal that one would go to for an event like that. But yeah, I don't know. I could be. Can I speak to that? Yeah. Sorry. I think that's a really good question. You know, what role does a principal play in this? I'm a grant writer. In order for me to bring in experts, it costs between $8,000 and $11,000 every year, and that's just for 7th grade.
Yeah.
$8,000 to $11,000 minimum. So, because I do grant writing, I have to submit my grants to my principal. Then it gets channeled up the chain to Rob. So there is a knowledge of what's happening, and there's also affirmation at the state level and within our community that what I'm doing has value because they're giving me money. They're not seeing that what I'm doing is offensive or inappropriate.
Jen, just to clarify before we get in too deep, we did not mean curriculum on this, right? We meant events.
No, 100%.
No,
Yeah.
curriculum's in there.
Not for
Curriculum's
this
in there.
particular sentence,
Okay.
though. Like this
Okay.
particular sentence, when we're saying the building principal, or to your point, whoever,
Yeah.
should review proposed event celebration and displays, I think the intent was non-curriculum.
But I do culminating events.
No, so what I hear though is that it's not clear. Like, I
It's
hear
not
that,
clear.
but I just wanted to clarify, our intent was not that the principal was approving every lesson. It was, these were larger, I think the intent of that sentence was larger scale things.
But where I'm going with
yeah.
this is that the safest way for an administrator to decide is to just say, don't do it. And I think there needs to be a sense of encouragement and celebration around doing different and exciting and engaging experiences for our kids. But if our principal is afraid that we're gonna run the risk, or in this case, because it does say principal, but run the risk of causing grief, then the answer's gonna be no. And in turn, it's gonna be the whitening of our district. And somehow we have to get beyond this fear factor. Otherwise, the answer's always gonna be no. No, you can't have children wearing beautiful clothing. No, your children can't be trying new and different food, because you're not of that culture.
I think the intent of the policy is the exact opposite of what you're concerned. Let me just go for a second. I completely hear you. No, I do. I completely hear you. But the intent of this policy, we're not there yet, clearly. But the intent is the exact opposite, I think, of that is because it's cultural respect and inclusion, like it's the concept of how do we do this in a way that it works, not to, I hear what
Okay,
you're saying in reality though.
But what's currently in place on the draft is pushing us in a different
I don't
direction.
know if you have the most updated draft.
So Sandra,
Yeah.
you haven't seen what I revised over the weekend
Oh,
yet?
no, I haven't
So
seen
you're
it.
talking about
So it's
what-
100 times better, right?
Yes,
So I can
100 times
home
better.
it's easy? Okay.
It's different, so look at
Okay,
it,
so I'm
because I
defending,
did
maybe I'm
take out-
defending something
No, and
that,
what you're saying is
Yeah,
super
so-
valuable, and I'm listening. Like I hear you. I just
I tried to remove what people were concerned about teaching and feeling like they can't do it, or that there's a chance of what I'm doing and I'm gonna be told I'm wrong and I'm violating a policy. So I really worked on changing that language around to be more positive and guidelines, so if you look at, under where it says policy, culturally responsive practices, like there's intentional and informed instruction and then respectful representation. Maybe just take a few minutes, read that, and then just see if that,
where are we? What?
so on page 1 of the policy,
Okay.
that, I think that's what Mia just gave you, right?
Mhm.
So under culturally responsive practices, number 1, and then number 2 is respectful representation. I tried to
Okay, that's
really
100 times
reword it,
better.
bring some
Yeah.
guidelines in there, so it wasn't, because a lot of what I heard from people was that if you don't have the lived experience or bringing someone in of the lived experience, and when we really kind of talking to many of our staff, they're like, that's like all of us, we can't really
Right.
teach what we're teaching now because of that. And that's why I pulled that out and had the comments of that really kind of handcuffs us as educators to teach.
And Ken, I took something directly from their letter and
Mhm.
added it to the philosophy to try to stress what the intent of it is. 'Cause clearly that did not come through in the original draft.
What are others' thoughts on anything? And then what we usually do is we kind of go like page by page, like kind of after people give some initial thoughts, like we kind of go page by page and see if we need clarification and whatnot. But if people have kind of general thoughts or questions about what we're talking about at all or why we're doing this or anything, feel free to chime in.
I had a question under the respectful representation part. For field trips and stuff, like if it has something to do with like a culture, like would that go against the policy or like with it? Because I know like in elementary school you did like the Underground Railroad field trip, and I know like now there's like a lot of negative use with that. So I'm just wondering like how that would fit into like the policy.
Yeah, it's a super good question.
That's a great question.
Noted.
I noticed under definitions, the definition for cultural appropriation, it specifies that like especially a marginalized or historically oppressed culture by individuals from a dominant culture. I feel like that wording kind of directs the reader to like assume that it can only be someone from a dominant culture and not like be offended by like anyone from any culture.
Valid point. Y'all are so smart. That's good schools. What are any other thoughts before?
I have a few questions just on just practical application. So on section 1A3, it says teachers and staff are encouraged to use primary sources, guest speakers, or culturally representative materials when incorporating cultural content into the curriculum. I just want to make, like, one of the things I've noticed, and I don't know if this belongs in the definitions section, but we have different sections that reference cultural content, cultural traditions, cultural practices. Is it worthwhile to kind of have a general understanding of what falls under that umbrella term?
Yeah, we can add more definitions.
Which umbrella term, sorry? I couldn't
Cultural
hear.
practices, cultural histories, cultural content. These are all different, like, phrases that are used.
I think that's a really good point, because I also think in a policy like this, like educating folks about
Yep.
the language that you're using that aren't just maybe common to everyone is important. And so I think in something like this, like having a longer definition section is important.
Yep.
So I agree with that, Rob.
I would also just, if it's 1B3, staff, students, and volunteers shall respect cultural traditions by avoiding attire, accessories, decorations, or makeup that mimic, stereotype, or caricature another culture's ceremonial, ethnic, racial, or religious identities. For the record, I want to state that I agree with this. I want to just point out the fact, however, to just draw attention to who would be making the determination that something is mimicking, stereotyping, or caricaturing another culture's ceremonial, ethnic, racial, or religious identities, because how that is determined is very important in terms of that being something that's addressed.
Mhm.
I would also add that that is also true on 1B4, which says decorations, learning materials, and event themes should thoughtfully and respectfully reflect cultural symbols and imagery. Again, I would just want to draw out who is making the determination of what is thoughtful and respectful around that. And I only say this because, you know, through my lens.
It's definitely you, so.
What's that?
It's definitely you, so it's a good question.
Yeah, it's just the lens I
Yeah,
see
no, it's
things in
valid.
as an administrator, as a former principal. These are things that typically fall in the administrative lap.
Mhm.
And I would not want to unfairly put a decision maker in a position to make these interpretations if they're not.
What was the second one? I got 1B3. The second one was.
1B4.
Thank you. And the 2 words of particular concern was.
The first one had to do with mimicking, stereotyping, caricatures, and how that would be determined and who would make that
Yep, I
determination.
got that one. And then the second one.
Second one would be
was-
the thoughtfully and respectfully, which is 1B4.
Yeah,
Thoughtfully
who determines what's thoughtfully, who determines
Exactly.
what's.
Where is that? Where is that criteria for that, and whose responsibility ultimately would that fall to?
Mm-hmm.
I also have, and again, this is more of a general, open-ended question, and this is just around the topic of curriculum. Just wondering how this will play out in practice in terms of those statements under the inclusive curriculum piece. Again, I want to be honest, I want to be very straightforward. I am very much in favor of inclusive curriculum, 100%. I just want to make sure that language we put in here is going to have intended practical application, right? So integrating multiple cultural viewpoints across subjects rather than confining cultural discussions to specific months or holidays. I think that, again, makes sense. We can see the intent there, that we want to make this a inclusive experience rather than an isolated experience. Acknowledging contributions of diverse racial, ethnic, and cultural groups in art, literature, science, and history. Again, I think, again, that sort of referencing back to Mia's point about, and Sandra's point also about, like, that being something that needs to be thematically integrated into our work. I guess I just want to make sure that the intent of what we're saying does not get misconstrued down the line by future, you know, people in different positions.
So we can go back, I'll note the concern, and then we can, when we get to that point, we have to wordsmith it, right?
Yeah, can you give an example of a way it might be misconstrued?
So, like, for example, integrate multiple cultural viewpoints across subjects. So I think, like, there's culture in every subject, right? Culture is wide-ranging. It touches every corner of everything that we do, especially educationally speaking. So
we're already doing that, which is
if
great.
we are to, sorry?
So I think we achieved that one in this district, like to the art example, right?
I would agree.
Like, yeah.
I would just say, like, how widespread will that be? Because there's a lot of culture in math.
Yes.
A lot of culture in math, and a lot of history in math that spans a lot of different cultures. How broad are we thinking here in terms of that taking form in a practical application is all I'm throwing out there. You know what I mean? Just to be.
I think one thing we have to think about is like Jen, for the part about not everything can be everything, and so I know what we're trying to say here is that it shouldn't just be like the social studies class around Thanksgiving, like for an example, right? Like that's kind of the intent of that sentence, I think.
I don't know, I didn't write that sentence.
So, so these are guidelines, right? It doesn't mean that integration of multiple cultural viewpoints across subjects, we're looking to see that at every grade level, across every content, pre-K to 12, right? These are guidelines of how to put these practices in place, that if we're going to be teaching about culture, right, some best practices to integrate that. So integrating that lesson that you're teaching, the culture that you're going to be teaching between social studies and ELA and art and music. Because if you're teaching culture, how does that culture then form within art and music, right? There's a lot behind that that you can bring in and teach the children as well. So you're not just teaching it maybe through the textbook, through one view, but you're looking as a team of how can we do this through multiple views of teaching that culture.
I 100%
So that's-
agree.
It's like guidance.
I just want to draw attention to the fact that it is somewhat of a broad statement that can be interpreted differently by a lot of different people, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I
so
think
we have to work on that.
yeah.
I also think that we need to put some sort of, like introduction paragraph over this list, because to me, if it's in a policy, like it's a must, unless it says that it's not a must. And so, like if it's just examples or just guidelines or just like, hey, things to consider, like that's very different than if like you're a real hardcore rule follower and you read that sentence, you think I need to integrate this into every time. Yeah, so I think we have to look at that a little bit.
That's kind of.
Because I don't think that's our intent, but I think that's
No.
how it reads a little bit.
Right.
So we should think through that, I think. Other thoughts from folks?
I had one question and one comment. I assume if a staff member, and this is not happening, I have no doubt that this is not happening, but an intentional, or reckless cultural appropriation that's causing harm to someone, that would be punishable, or disciplinary could occur under a different policy, correct? I'm sure there's like teachers' professional standards or something.
Right, I think
So,
that plus discrimination, I think we have other policies that would account for
Should we reference
that.
those then?
it really does speak to like everything, from the feedback and everything that you have said. I'm so sorry. I just
My name's Sandra.
Thank you, Sandra. Everything that you said makes total sense to me, and none of it would I thought of when I would have read this. And so it seems like it started from a policy, when I read it, it looks like it started from a policy that was gonna be very prescriptive and have like consequences, and it feels like the whole room really has evolved into, this isn't the place to put consequences, this is really more of a statement of the district's aspirational commitments, right? So I just wonder, no?
That is very nice, and we have that in the equity vision statement
Okay.
and things like that. This is an actual policy. Like, this is not supposed to be like a best practice document or whatever. It is an actual policy document, and not all policy, in my opinion, policy is actually not for punitive, it's actually for support of folks. So like, I feel like really good, well-written policies actually help guide employees instead of like, are there to punish them. I don't actually look at policies as punitive, but I think it's supposed to be a policy document, not just a guidance, like a best practice document. In my opinion, where we write, because the school committee, just for context too, the school committee oversees policies for the school district, but the administration implements those policies, and there's definitely a clear like line there, and so this is a school committee policy that then the administration would take and work with their staff, et cetera, to implement. So that's always important to remember too, because we're advising the school committee on what should be in here from that kind of more big picture level.
All right, well, definitely thank you for that, because now I definitely need to think more about what I've heard here, and also, I mean, this isn't going anywhere tonight, correct?
Oh,
So we've
God.
got, okay, copy that.
Other thoughts, questions?
I actually have a question. I'm a French teacher by training, and I teach French at URI part-time. My question is actually about the use of the word primary source and secondary source. I am fluent in French, but I am not actually French. So, am I a primary source? And that question of like, when we use that term, are we narrowing people, or does that, because I am not born in France, I'm fluent in French, trained in French in education, does that bump me down to a secondary source? And like, would that be open us up for complaints on like teacher training or something like that, just through the lens, like as a language teacher? And I do, this is like so much of what language teachers do, like every single day, you know, talking about culture and how culture and language are intertwined, and history and symbols and behaviors, and there's so much in here, and I just like skimmed it this morning, so I didn't really break it down, but the idea, like maybe we need to define it, or think
I-
about how we use the term.
I think that's why I'm here and saying, you know, here I've worked all this time and energy to understand cultures that are different than mine so that I can teach them in an authentic way. And I do see the value of primary sources. I do see the value of guest speakers. I mean, that's why I grant fund to bring our community into my classroom. But the reality is, I am part Polish, I'm part Swedish, second generation American. And here I'm supposed to be teaching about Asia and Africa. So I agree totally that this is, number one, part 3, that's what we should be striving for, but the reality is that there are times that we are going to have secondary sources. And that is not diminishing, but it shouldn't diminish the experience when we are striving to do our very best.
Or the quality, for that matter.
Right.
Speaking as an educator, I mean, I make sure that before I teach about some kind of art history that is not directly involved in my own culture, I make sure I do my homework. And, you know, I think this is like the only piece for me that's, and I understand what you mean about primary and secondary sources. You don't want us to just use hearsay through that, and I understand that, I totally get it. But I feel like, you know, who's monitoring those sources? How are we monitoring those sources? What are those sources? Can I be a source? Can she be a source because she speaks French? Or is that no longer okay because she's not French?
It's more of a definition issue.
Exactly, it's more of a definition issue, and we just have to be very careful because we are dealing with educators who really strive for excellence in this department, that we don't want to make it so that they no longer want to teach this because it's just, they don't know what the definition is between a primary and secondary source.
I think that too goes back to the point about the, like, what's policy and what's guidelines and what's best practices, because the way that I read that, and I completely hear you, and as someone who teaches, I'd have to really think about how to differentiate that, but I think, like, for me, I read are encouraged to, and that means, to me, not mandated, right? And so, but I hear you too on, like, the fear factor, and like they'll just be like, oh, it's hard, I give up, like I don't want to even think through that. And so I've really heard that piece that you all have shared about how do we reframe that if we keep it in to say, like, we would really like you to, if possible, but you're not going to get in trouble if you can't. We really still want you to teach this. You know, like, I think that's...
Yeah, I feel like there's
Yeah.
such a big gap between, because like never in my mind did I like set out with this policy with the intent of like, we don't want you to do what you're doing, right? Like that's not, and I can't figure out where the disconnect is between like trying to like stop the like what has been happening, but not like the amazing work that you've been doing. I mean, I know the amazing work that you do, like, and I know like there are other teachers that I don't know who are out there doing it, and like to have you feel that you have to be afraid to like take risks and explore other things and like things that you're not familiar with yourself, or you know, worry about where your sources are or things like that. So I'm not sure where that disconnect is, but there has to be a way to reconcile it between still encouraging you to like, because out of anybody, I want our curriculum in our school to be more diverse, right? And like we need to be able to do those things, and we need to be a global school, but we also have to be cognizant of the fact that like we have to have awareness around the fact that, you know, we have to be making sure that we are not appropriating, and there is a line, and I don't, you know, it's not clear cut, and nobody's gonna be able to say ABC is where you cross it, but like that line is there, and we have to make sure we're not going over it, and like, so how do we find that balance?
This is better.
Okay.
So this is better.
Okay.
And so I think it's doing what you're doing, Jen, which is talking about it and starting to hear how the teachers interpreted it. We also need our principals who cheer us on. I mean, our principals need to be empowered and not have the fear either. Because if the principals are afraid that, oh, I chose the wrong thing for a dance, well then now I'm not, you know, then that just takes them down a path where they don't want to make a mistake. Nobody wants to hurt or damage or think that we're treating people less. But we need to empower our principals to cheer us on.
And I think that's a big one right there. They need to be celebrating us, they need to be like going, oh, this is so great, you know, have more of this, let's do this. Oops, we might have misstepped here, but that's okay, cause we're gonna do it slightly different, but we're gonna keep doing. So I think if we can somehow coach our principals along, know that, you know, we have support up here is really powerful too. And then the wordage where we walk away going, yeah, I wanna do this, I wanna try this, I wanna learn more. Instead of like, oh my gosh, I put my kids in beautiful clothing, now I'm gonna get in trouble, you know. And that was a big takeaway at the end of my year last year. It's like, oh, my children wore authentic clothing, and now I'm gonna get reprimanded. I mean, that was a big takeaway after 5.5 months of work. And where I should have been, my students should have been cheered on, celebrated, let's take this to the newspaper. So somehow, the culture in our district has to be such, as reflected in the language, that this is great and wonderful. We have a diverse population. We want to know more, learn more, and experience more.
So,
I am sorry that did not happen, because you are right, they should have been, like, and so I personally want to apologize to you if I contributed to that.
I don't think you did, but I think there's a culture within this district that is afraid.
I agree
Well,
with
that's
you.
clear.
Yeah,
That's come through
very
clear in the feedback,
And
yeah.
so,
Right.
So I was trying to figure out how to work through
how
that.
do we go about that? And
But
I
it's
do
already
think
starting in a very
professional
positive
development
direction.
in this area is needed.
I was just gonna
Desperately.
say that.
Yeah.
You know what, honestly, the biggest feedback I got after reading that the first time is I honestly think, I'm sorry, I don't mean to speak for all teachers, but we have all these PD days, some of which, you know, some of the trainings can be fairly tedious. I think this is something that honestly, I don't know one teacher that wouldn't embrace this. How do you better integrate cultural practices into math? I would actually be very curious about that, honestly. Like, I would love to see something like that, because then when I do the proportions of the face, I can take that and incorporate it into what I do as well, because that's also math. You know, I think it is, if it's possible at all, when we do clean this up and approve it and whatever, and it gets put into place as policy, how cool would it be to also follow that up with some professional development? That would be really neat. So that does, you know, we do feel, you know, embraced by our community, and our principals do feel like they have the backing of the school department. That would be wonderful.
I just wanted to piggyback on what you said. I wasn't gonna mention it because I'm not sure if it really fits for this, but based on your comment, like the PD is great, but I also think that having the planning time to be able to have those conversations outside of a PD is important as well. So if you're looking at math and looking at the different mathematicians that have contributed to our understanding of math, that ties in directly to different history classes as well. But if you're teaching in a silo, then you're not able to make those connections. But that's got to be something that is planned for. Like, it doesn't just happen. There's got to be a space and a time where that conversation can happen. I don't know if that is happening at the different levels, but if the goal is to really get to that level where across domains that we're doing these cultural activities that are tying in lots of different things, and I think the community would get behind that if they see how it's not just one teacher doing this one thing, but how it's connecting to multiple subject matter or subject areas, and then also being able to share that with the community. Like, if you're doing a larger scale project and you're able to have the students present to the community, and it's, you know, there's no hiding, like everybody can see what you're working on, I think that will really help in that community outreach piece.
And I just want to go back to something Rob was pointing out, and this is something that we talk about at Davisville: integrate multiple cultural viewpoints, discussions, rather than combining cultural discussions to specific months or holidays. So I personally have big issues with Hispanic Month or Black History Month. because I don't believe it's a month, right? But it's a stepping stone for people who've never done. So it's like a reminder, like, oh, I haven't done, I better do. But maybe, again, this comes with PD and this comes with growth, is that, okay, we have the month, that's year one, we acknowledge that, now how are we gonna go beyond that year two? Do you see what I'm saying? So, some of what's in place are stepping stones for people who have never done, but our goal is to do better. So how do we help people to get beyond that month? And that's where the PD comes in. That's where the funding comes in to bring in our community members. But this is 100 times better. Thank you.
What are other thoughts? I'm curious if other people have.
Abby, James?
No worries. I haven't, again, I have to go through like the full documents, like to be able to really give feedback.
Work, right, and I put some comments.
Yeah, 'cause there's some things that I see that I have questions on, but-
too, just to go through and like, keep massaging this.
I think the biggest thing for me
working
is,
on like what we need to put in here or change, right, to get it to the point where we can bring it to school.
well, I also think we need to really differentiate between guidelines and best practices and policy. Like, I think it's like they're not the same. And so like, I think some of this comes along with like the PD that backs it up in different things, but I do believe strongly that there are a couple things that we should policy. To your point, if you're like, if a parent is complaining or a guardian is upset about something, being able to point to a policy, or if a teacher is getting, needs the policy for support about the work that they're doing, having that really well documented, you know. So I think we have to cull through like what should be in this and what's not, because I do think there's some things that go beyond policy, but they're interpreting it as policy, and it's not. It's just like best suggestions or like, you know, things to think about, and that's not policy to me. So I think I would appreciate if we could go through it with that lens.
So what's the next step with this then?
Well, do we want to, is there anything in here that we, like I move stuff around, right? So anything that I put a strike through, tried to put up above.
Yep.
So even though I said before, you know, some might be guidelines, really it's the language, it's a lot of what was below that I put the lines through, they rewrote.
Yep.
In a positive tone. So is some of it guidance? I mean, it's a way to look at, I mean, I wrote it in a way of like, here's how we can move the district forward and really considering how to bring more culture in, right? And doing it in a way that's teachable and not in a way that people fear it, right? So maybe we kind of clean this up in a way to take out all the strike-throughs, resend it back out, right? To get some feedback too, and work on where the definitions are. So that way staff can see that we did work on this. It is written in a different manner now.
I do think we should, because I think everybody had the same feedback on the individuals from a dominant culture, that should come out. And maybe, adding that, you know, guidelines, but to Erin's point, some are not and some are.
Right, and maybe it's not that we phrase it as guidelines, because I mean, it's ways that you can actually go and do this, right? You can bring in more.
Suggestions include or something like that.
Could you have that as a appendix or something separate from the actual policy, so there's no confusion about, like if you have appendix 1 or appendix A, best practices or guidelines, and then there's no confusion about what's being expected, and the policy could just be the policy.
Good suggestion.
Like bare bones and then extra type of
Right,
thing.
this is what,
appendix of-
as
of the
a
guidelines.
school district, this is what we will maintain, like a healthy dose of definitions. This is the policy. If there is X, Y, and Z, these are where it's going to be. Here are some guidelines or best practices, and then the teachers could be actively engaged in building those best practices. And then there's no, like, you will have to do this.
Right.
These are just things that may work out well.
If you're interested, FYI.
Alright, so it sounds like next steps are adding some definitions in, which I think we should do regardless. Whether the definition is hit in the appendix or not, like I think it's an opportunity to define some things. And then it sounds like perhaps the administration culling through like what should be in the appendix versus what should be in the policy would be like the next step.
Say that one more time.
So differentiating between policy and best
policy and
practices.
guidelines,
Yeah, like
yeah.
to that, I think that appendix suggestion is a good one, like, cause I think the goal is to have we talked about like having this document be proactive and be helpful to the folks that work in this district or even like the PTOs or the whomever is doing things. But I think where I get really nervous is like, if it's in the policy, to me, it means it's a must. And I wanna differentiate between the musts and the, hey, this is a cool thing to consider, you know, like I've always said, like, you know, that it would be helpful to me of like things, like if you're trying to decide if something's cultural appreciation versus appropriation, here are some things to think about, right? Like, that's not a must, it's just like giving that, like, guideline of like, you know, is this tied to the curriculum? Yes, you know, so for your example of your students wearing those beautiful things, like, that would hit the criteria in my head of like complete cultural appreciation because it is connected to curriculum, it is connected to learning, it's using authentic things, which is in my head a primary source, you know, like, so that one, yep, no problem, that totally makes sense. Whereas other ones, you might look at that list and be like, oop, actually no, like, that's not that, so like we need to rethink what we're doing. Like, that's where I'm trying to help folks like move forward, because we have had instances, we have so many amazing examples of when this goes very, very well. We don't talk about those a lot because I think the reason we got here is that there are some examples of where it didn't go well and students and families and supporters were concerned, and we were trying to figure out how to honor that in a way that like supports it, because I think collectively as a group we believe that is the goal of like, but like somewhere we missed some things along the lines, and honestly I think most of it's not completely curriculum connected. It's
No,
that
I
fray.
don't think none of
Yeah.
it was connected
No, some
to.
was.
Oh, that's true. I
Yeah.
forgot about that.
But
the
most,
majority
yeah.
were not connected to learning curriculum.
Yeah,
They were
yeah, it's
outside
that
of
phrase
scope.
stuff, yeah. Any other thoughts from folks as we will clearly see another draft of this for you to enjoy?
Thank you. Sandra, thank you for coming today. I appreciate
No,
it.
thank you for listening
No,
and
of course.
hearing, because even this is like, I'm gonna sleep well tonight,
Yeah.
it was better.
Yeah, we appreciate
Ken
your
did
feedback,
that,
it's super
and
helpful.
I appreciate Ken doing that.
Thank you.
So the one thing I want to just talk about quickly is number 5, the plan to implement a policy review. One of our things that we have said that we will do is to review any policy that has not been reviewed in the past 5 years. And that we will have a plan to be in compliance with that by August of 2026. Laura has offered to go through and put together a list of any policies that have not been reviewed in the past 5 years so that we can come up with an action plan to strategize and go after those. So I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you, Laura, that's much appreciated. So that'll be something that we can discuss at a future meeting. I sent everybody the.
Jen, just on that, we're gonna assume it hasn't been reviewed, or we're gonna go through like minutes?
No, we have the date of the last,
Last time it was revised.
we're gonna go by the last date
Yeah,
of the policy.
yeah, those are not
That's-
always the same.
But that's what we're gonna
And
go
so,
by,
just
yeah.
for context, we've started the practice of if we review it and don't make any changes, we note that. I think in the past, they only change the date if they change
Changed it.
something.
Like they may have
Yeah.
looked at it, but.
So we're gonna
not-
make the
yeah.
assumption that if it is, you know, a
Whatever.
2018 date,
Yeah.
that it hasn't been looked at then, but in reality, it may have, there
Yes.
just might not have been any changes.
Yes,
I just wanna make sure people are clear
Yes,
on that,
we're
'cause
gonna go
sometimes
by
they'll
the-
say to me, this policy hasn't been looked at since then, and I'm like, well, no, it might have been.
We're
They
gonna go
might
by
just
the
not have any
last
changes.
date
Yeah,
noted.
alright, just wanted to clarify
Yeah.
that for the
Yeah.
world.
And we will, if it says 2018 and we look at it, we will note reviewed.
Yes. If we chose not to make
And
any
even if we
changes, we'll
make
note
no
that
changes,
as we
will
go
note
forward,
those.
yeah.
Yes.
because that helps.
I sent
the breadcrumbs.
everybody the list of dates for the balance of the year. While I have Ken in the room and he can't run away from me, we're gonna nail down the question on the February meeting date, which there was a question on a potential conflict.
I'm looking, pulling up calendar.
There's a potential for conflict for, I think, must have been with the budget meeting. Andrew is not available on the 24th. So we wanted to still hold this one on the 23rd.
So right now, on my calendar and what has gone out to people on the committee, so I sit on budget and finance and I sit on policy. Both of them say tentative. Both of them are scheduled for Monday, February 23rd.
Yes, I know.
Right around the same time. So I thought I'm trying to go back thinking of like the emails that went back and forth.
Yeah,
I
they
thought
asked us
budget
to
was
move
gonna say
policy.
we were moving, right?
We asked to move and I said no because Andrew's not available on the Tuesday.
Could budget move, cause they don't have that extra constraint?
Problem is the members on that are not available.
Do you have
That was a-
quorum though?
You know, it's a small group.
Could you do after this meeting?
Prefer not to. It's been a really long day. Someone say no. By all means, no.
So there's been a bazillion emails
Can
about this, so I
budget-
think Jen just is hoping that we can resolve it,
Can
so
budget meet from 4 to 5?
they can budget meet earlier?
It might, I would love to say yes, that we can meet at 4 o'clock. I will check on that and see
Okay.
if we can get all the members there for that to meet from 4 to 5, because I think an hour is plenty of time
Okay,
for that, but.
all right, so we'll assume that.
If need be too, if they couldn't, say they could do 4:30, like,
Part of the reason why budget was meeting earlier was because there were certain people on that committee that were only around earlier, but then we adopted the policy that said our meetings can't start prior to 4 o'clock.
yeah, but you still could do 4.
We can do 4, right? I was just saying, if we
Yeah.
went earlier, would give us,
Okay,
I was gonna say you could overlap a little bit, although not ideal. I don't know what space they need.
well, we can't because we're
Yeah,
both on both.
it's in the same.
Yeah, I mean, I
That's
guess we
right,
could,
you're on it too.
yeah.
Nope, yeah. Alright, so Ken
Okay.
will check to see if budget can meet from 4 to 5
So
that
we'll leave
day.
these dates as it is. So, okay, before we adjourn, does anybody have any questions or comments on anything from tonight?
I just wanted to state about the meeting dates, that they're super important, to make sure you have on your calendar, and if you can't come, to let Jen know, because one of the other rules of the Open Meeting Act is that you have what's called quorum, and so a certain amount of your members to hold the meeting. And so if enough of us can't come, we have to cancel the meeting, we have no choice. And so communication to Jen about what you can and can't do super matters, because one person can make the difference, and so we just wanna plan for that. If we know in advance we don't have quorum, we can solve it. When it happens like a day or two in advance, it is really hard, we just have to cancel the meeting, and that stinks, cause we don't meet often, so.
you
Check those
should
schedules.
have all those dates, because our school committee clerk should have put them on, and you should have all received
We
calendars.
have it on the agenda
So
too,
you should
yeah.
have that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second, okay. All in favor? Okay,
Aye.
awesome. Okay, return to
Jen, did you? Oh, never mind. Hold on a second, you just wanna, Mia, that's still on, just so you know.